Hey guys, welcome back to Oak Garden Flower Shop. I have Tia with me, and she's here. She's going to speak on the grief and loss program regarding that. And I just wanted to let you know, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely, a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we can go ahead and just start with your story. What's your connection between grief and loss?
So in 2017, August 20th, 2017, I lost my father to stage 4 colon cancer. So I was 30 when he passed away. So obviously, for most people, like that's fairly young. To lose a parent, obviously not at all what I ever anticipated. And it was ironic because that year was off to like an incredible start. So I turned 30 in April. I graduated with my master's in May. He did make it to my graduation. I had a graduation party. So like everything was well. And then it was about July when my mom had called and I was at work. So I couldn't answer. I think we had a town hall meeting. And so my mom called and was like, hey, like we are being admitted into the hospital. Like he went for kind of like he was having concerns. And he had went in and it was like he's gonna be admitted. And so I'm like, okay, like whatever. Um, and I just remember like my mom had asked me to like come over after I got off work. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so got to her house and like went upstairs and she was just like, and I could already tell like something was off. And so she was just like letting me know like there's nothing else they can do for him. They're giving him a couple weeks to live. And so it was just like, okay, wait, like obviously when someone has stage 4 colon or cancer in general, um, the prognosis is that it's likely terminal. I think for me that had never really set in, I'll say. And so like I would talk to my dad regularly. So like I would text him every day, like good morning, champ. And just kind of like checking in just to see how he was doing. And I mean he put up a really, really strong fight. And I think as he got towards the end of it, selfishly, like I wanted him still here because it's like
Mm,
we have so much left to do. Like I only had one child at the time. She was 7, I believe. I hadn't been married yet, and I'm like, you got to walk me down the aisle. Like we have all of these things that are still left to do. Um, but it was he had just become so like debilitated that it was like
mm,
this isn't like my dad has always been like my Superman, my hero. I used to hang from his arms when I was a kid. And so seeing him like so frail and just like almost bedridden, it was just like if this is what it means to have you here physically, I would rather you like be at peace because
mm,
it was just extremely difficult like seeing him in that state when he was one that was just always like up and on the go and just like moving around and everything. And so as we got towards the end, I went through like this whole debacle with my employer at the time to get FMLA.
mm,
And that was a whole process and arguing back and forth with the doctors and just everything else. And I had gotten to the point where I'm just like, fire me if you will, but like my priority is being here for my dad as I know he's about to transition and just helping my mom like any way that I could. Um, and I will never forget, like there was an HR rep who, I mean, like completely went to bat for me, contacted the doctors, got everything sorted out. And I went to work and she was like, everything's settled, like go home. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Like that was just one less thing that I had to worry about. And it really just allowed me to focus on just the time again that I had left with my dad. And I think um, I was able to obtain a sense of peace when he passed simply because I had the ability to spend that last entire month with him. So just taking care of him and being there for him. But then also because we knew the time was coming, we were able to have like our final conversations. And so
mm,
I had wrote him like a 3-page letter. Um, and then I was like, okay, like and you read it, and then I'll come over and we can talk about it. And so I know a lot of people with grief, there's like this lack of closure and like,
mm,
I wish I could have said this, or I wonder if they knew this, or, that kind of thing. And I was very grateful that we were able to like prepare in a sense, so that I don't have that regret. Everything that I wanted to say, I was able to say to him. Everything that he wanted to say to me, he was able to say to me. And so the morning that he was experiencing a lot of pain, and the morning that we were going to the hospital, so I was at my parents' house and he's like, I need to go. So my mom had called the squad. And again, like I'm very like I'm an empath. So I can just something just was off. And so he's like sitting on the corner of the bed, and my mom had this like Jesus calling book where it's like this daily devotional. And I will never forget, the devotional was about like God calling us home. And I was just like, I didn't want to read
Mm,
it. Like I didn't want to read it. I
mm,
got super emotional. And he just there was just this peace about him as he sat there. Um and so again, like we were waiting for the squad to get there. So the squad came and I ended up driving separately. But I feel like when I look back at it, I feel like he knew this was his last time, like being in their room and in their house, because you could just see him kind of just like taking it all in. And so he was in the hospital for a couple of days. And so my brother, he didn't live locally, so he came into town, and other family members. And thankfully, I live like maybe at the time, like 7 minutes away from the hospital. So we had spent the time there, and then I went back home because again, I had a daughter, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my brother called and was like, "Hey, like his breathing is getting heavier. Like I think you need to make your way back up here." And so I'm like, okay, like, okay. So I get there, like the room is dark, my mom and my brother are there, and so we kind of just say a prayer, and then again, it was like by the time it was maybe like 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then we all fell asleep. And then
mm,
we woke up, I think like a doctor came in, and we woke up and he had passed, like when we all woke up.
mm,
Um, and so it was like I can't even describe, it was just like, wow, like, okay, okay. And so like I stood over him and gave him a hug, and then like he actually like had his last breath, and I'm like, ooh, that was a lot. Like
mm,
that was just a lot. And just I can still see like his face and just everything. So that was like a bit traumatizing.
mhm,
Um, because that's kind of like the last vision or image that I have of him. Um, and I remember like my uncle was there, my mom's brother, and he kind of just held her. And so we had our moment, and then they came in to talk like logistics of like all of that. So I left to go get my daughter to, let her know what happened. And I just remember walking out of the hospital, and like the sun was shining so bright. And it was
mm,
just like I smiled, and I was just like,
mm,
he's at peace. Like he's at peace. And I was so grateful. My dad was one where like no matter what he was going through, he was still making sure everyone else like was taken care of, and just kind of looking out for everyone else. And so I'm just like, he passed peacefully with his family around him. And we were up for a little bit, but like when I got there and we were like talking, and so it was just like he waited like until we were all like, so we didn't witness it, but it was just like he waited until we were all asleep, and like I said, just peacefully transitioned. um, and so I think at first, because I went to pick my daughter up and I took her out to breakfast, and I'm like, Papa's an angel now. And I don't know that it computed, and it was like, okay, so, and so then, and that was that. I had already promised her that I was going to take her to this gymnastics event that day with my best friend and her daughter. And so I had text my friends, like it happened. And of course they're like, oh my gosh, like, and so I'm like, it's all is well. And so I had text my friend like, hey, like what time does it start? And she's like, what you're still coming? And I'm like, yeah, I promised her I was gonna take her. So yeah, I'm gonna bring her. And so I will never forget my when I went to her house and we got in her car, and she was just like, I can I hug you? And I'm like, that's fine. And she was just like, I just don't understand how you're not like in the fetal position on
mm,
the floor. Like I just don't understand it. And I'm like, to be honest, I don't understand it either. Like I don't know how I'm still functioning right now, but I am, so we're gonna take it. And then I think a couple weeks after that, I stayed so busy with like everything. So one of the major one of the major things that my dad left me with was faith. And so
Mm,
during this process, I was so angry because like my dad would literally give his shirt like off of his back. And so I'm just like, I was questioning God, like, why him? Like, there's so
mm,
many evil people in this world. Like, why would you take like one of the good ones? It doesn't make sense. And so like I went through like that whole thought process. In addition to, I had a very toxic, very stressful job at the time. And so knowing that I was going to get 3 days of bereavement, I'm just like, I can't, I cannot go back. And so one of the things that I learned in spending that last month with my dad, because even though he knew his fate, he still was smiling, wasn't complaining. And so I'm just like, life is really too short.
mm,
Like, and you know, people say that often, but it was like just to be able to see it. And I'm just like, I was counting down the seconds to the
mm,
minute to the hour of when I would clock out. And I'm just like, that is not a way to live. And so literally the day after he passed away, I went to my job and I went to my manager and I'm like effective immediately, like I quit. I can't. And he was like, "No, don't do that. Like just give us a 2 week notice so you can be rehireable." And I'm just like, that is the furthest thing like from my mind right now. Like, and I have no intentions on ever coming back here. But it was, I mean, he was coming from a good place, which I totally appreciated. But it was like as soon as I left, like this dark cloud that had been hovering over me for years. Like I
mm,
just felt this instant sense of relief of like,
mm,
okay, now I can deal with what I need to deal with and not worry about like, okay, I got to come back to work in 3 days. And I was working on the phones. So it's like if I was having a moment, it didn't allow the opportunity to kind of process it. And so because we lived in Columbus, we were from Canton. We went to Canton for about 2 weeks. So we went like literally that same week to get the arrangements and everything together. It was super therapeutic because I was around like all of my family. And
mm,
so everyone was close with my dad. So like it was people sharing stories of how he touched them or how he inspired them. But there was just a lot of laughter. And I never realized like how therapeutic laughter can be. So it wasn't like this somber, like, oh my gosh, like it was just like this is family, it's around love. Like it was just super encouraging and uplifting. Um, and then we had the service that was definitely rough. Just obviously like the final look, but then it was so beautiful. There were so many people, and because it
mm,
was not local to where we lived, like not that it was like, oh, I wonder how many people are going to show up, but it was just like it was about 2 hours away from where we lived, and I'm like,
mm,
nobody's gonna drive, and I will never forget. Some of my best friends showed up, like surprisingly, one of my childhood best friends that I hadn't talked to in years came.
mm,
So it was just beautiful just seeing like the outpour of just support and just like love and all of that. And then when we got to the cemetery, and obviously like you can see the procession, I mean, just lines and lines and lines of cars. And I'm just like, I'm thankful because if this is the legacy, like this is how you do it. Like this is how you do it where you have so many people who have nothing but great things to say about you, so many people who can speak to, you being there for them at a downtime in their life, but just it was beautiful just to see like of course I'm biased, he's my dad. He was like everything. But seeing like his coworkers and family members and people he grew up with when he was a kid like just come forward and just share these stories was like, wow, like yeah, like that man did some things. And so again, like I stayed there, I stayed in Canton for I think about a week after the service. So it was still good. I was with my brother. They had him and my sister-in-law had just had my niece. So like I had a little baby that was like helping me like through it. And then I came back to Columbus and avoidance is like a huge coping mechanism of
mm,
mine, not even just with grief, but just in general. And it wasn't until like I had to be still. So I was going and going and going. And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. No, I'm good. And then I had to sit down and it was
mm,
okay, I'm not good actually.
mm,
Um, but it wasn't until I think like 3 weeks after the fact that it actually hit me like, wait, he's gone. Like
mm,
and not coming back. And it wasn't until then, and it sounds so odd when I say it, but it's just like death is so permanent.
Mm,
And it's like you don't necessarily realize that in the midst of it, but it was like when I actually had to be still, I'm just like, okay, so like I'm never gonna hear his voice again. I'm never, gonna get a hug or a forehead kiss, or, I'll never hear his laugh again outside of like videos that I had. And so then like I was down bad.
mm,
It was very difficult. I think people can be empathetic, but I feel like until you have actually experienced the loss of a parent, you just simply you don't know what to do or what to say. And that was kind of some of the feedback I got, where like the people I thought I would hear from, I didn't. And that
mm,
was hurtful to deal with, because it's just like some of my best friends, and it's like, you guys know
mm,
how close I was to my, like, how can you not like show up for me? And then after the fact, it was like, well, I didn't know what to say. And it was like, and I think a lot of people struggle with not having the right things to say, or wanting to make you feel better. And it's not, there's nothing you can say that's going to bring him back. However, a simple, just letting you know, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, I love you, like something like that is sufficient. Like, it just to let me know, because I think one of the major things I had to come to terms with is my life stopped and everything else around me kept going. So
mm,
everyone else's lives continued on. It was like, yeah, I'm so sorry, sorry for your loss. Let us know if you need anything. But life moved on. And it was like, well, wait, like my life doesn't just, like, I'm fatherless now. So my life doesn't just get to like I pick right back up where we left off and I just keep going. And I think that's one of the toughest things to deal with, just in regards to grief in general, is realizing everyone is not impacted the same way that you are.
mm,
And so a lot of people don't really know what to do with that. A lot of people don't know that it's not just directly after you lose someone, it's months down the road. It's not this like very linear path of like, oh, okay, I'm better now and all is well. It could be, he passed away, it'll be 8 years this year, and there's still
mm,
moments where like something will happen or a song will come on and it's just like, oh man. Or I had two sons since he passed away, and I think a lot about like, I just like, what would he be like with them? I know that
mm,
he'd be like, they'd be running circles around him and he'd be outside tossing a football, like all of these things. And so it's hurtful to know that like my sons will
mm,
never get to like experience him. So it's trying to like keep his legacy and his memory alive, and showing them pictures and sharing stories with them, and things of that nature. But it's just like so many things that don't hit you immediately
yeah,
that come down the road. Um, the firsts, like everything, the first Christmas, the first, birthday. Unfortunately, his birthday is like the same weekend as Father's Day weekend. So
oh,
it's like a double whammy. I hate that time of year, because it's just like his birthday and then literally Father's Day. And so it's just like that stark reminder of like, so as I'm going to get cards for like my kid's dad, it's the realization I'll never buy another Father's Day card for my dad. So
mm,
it's little things that people don't really think about, very like trivial things that just go on about your day. That it's like people think like major, like, oh, I mean, it's like very simple things, very, very simple things can be triggering. And so eventually I think, and I'm not even really sure like how I dug myself out of it. At that point, I kind of started to restructure my relationship with God and like shift from anger to like, if my dad found peace and was like fine with the fact that all of this was happening, like maybe I shouldn't be angry. So it kind of like reignited my faith. And even just with like quitting my job, like I had nothing lined up. And shortly before he passed, I was like, I got my master's and I was struggling trying to find an entry level job, and like no one would hire me because they wanted you to have experience. And I just remember him telling me like the right opportunity will come. Do not stress about it. Your time will come. Like it'll all will be well. And I was like, no, because I need to have this and I need to do, and it was just like, and it didn't. And then 3 weeks, I think like right when I got back to Columbus, so like 3 weeks after his passing, I was offered a job that I didn't even apply for. and it was an HR entry level job. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. So I was grateful because it allowed me to be there for my mom and like not have to like go to work, but I was able to kind of support her. They were married for 40 years. So this was like a
Mm,
huge loss for her. So just being able to just be there for her was super helpful. And then just giving me time to like really like sit with it, like, okay, he's not here. And like now this is a whole new life almost. I think one of the misconceptions is getting back to normal, and it's coming to the realization you'll never be the person you were before
mm,
that loss happened. I'll never go back to being a daddy's girl because he's no longer here. And
mm,
so I think a lot of us struggle with grief because it's like, I just want to get back to the things I was doing before, and I want to be that person again. And it's just like, it's an unrealistic expectation to chase, thinking that you'll go back to being the person you were. And that's with any major life change, whether it's having kids, a job, what have you. Like it's just you don't go back to that person. You ultimately learn how to navigate life in this new way. And so that was one of the things that I processed. And unfortunately, I've had several close friends who've lost their father over the course of the last couple of years. And the beauty of it is that I get to be there for them.
mhm,
And I don't think that unless you've gone through it, you really know. And even still, everyone's relationship is different. So it's not even like, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I don't, but I can absolutely empathize. And I get what you're saying, where it's like today I was smiling, tomorrow I'm like I was in shambles, like that kind of thing. And so I think being able to use like the pain that I went through ultimately to show up as the person I wish I would have had as I was
mm,
navigating grief has been like extremely rewarding. And my friends have been extremely thankful and just like, you get it. And I'm like, and I hate it. And I hate that's our shared experience. But if we have to have this traumatic loss, if we have to suffer through this pain, I would much rather use this pain and turn it into purpose. And like I said, just being able to be there for other people and support other people, knowing that you got to check in beyond the service. Like you have to do like regular check-ins. You have to, send extra prayers and thoughts for the first of everything. And even after the first, holidays are difficult when that parent or that person was such a heavy part of your traditions, and it's
mhm,
obvious that they're not there anymore. So I think it's just that ongoing support that a lot of people, it just like not that you forget and just, but it is, I mean, ultimately it's like, oh, whoops, I forgot. It's Father's Day. Hey, want you to know that I'm thinking about you kind of thing. Um, but it's just knowing that people need support beyond just the service and the initial passing. And like I said, just showing up for people in that way. I got back to writing after he passed away, which is something that I've always been passionate about, but just was on the back burner. But it became very therapeutic. So
mm,
writing about my loss, I was never able to actually like verbalize the way that I felt and how I was processing, but I was able to be very vulnerable and transparent in my writing. And then when sharing my writing, I would have people that would reach out to me like, oh my gosh, I lost my grandparent. And so
mm,
I'm trying to navigate it. So thank you so much for like sharing how you felt. And I just feel like we go through things for a reason. And so we can either like harbor everything and like keep everything inside of ourselves. Or we can share it. It's not easy like to share it. And there's probably a day where like this conversation, I would be sitting here like boohooing and not able to like get through kind of just
mm,
walking through like this entire ordeal. But I'm at a point where it's just like if I have a chance and opportunity to honor my dad by again sharing his legacy and just using my experience to help the next person, that's literally what he would do. Like that
mhm.
is literally how I get to carry on his legacy is being the helpful person, the thoughtful, considerate person that he was, and just using my story to help other people.
Oh, yeah, that's, oh my goodness. Oh, that's heart-wrenching. Just because he had such love and he was giving love and the people came to support because he was love. It's just you don't find that often in
Hmm.
people, like usually like, oh, he was sarcastic, like it,
Yeah.
I love that. And I love the healing that you got too, and just the support as well when you're with your family. And like you guys were all together and laughing. I'm like, oh, if there was ever a type of grieving process, that's the one that I would rather choose, because that it sounds like love. It
I think
sounds.
a lot of times there's just different reactions. And so
Mm,
sometimes it's isolation. And I had those
mm,
moments where I just cut myself off from everyone. And then I realized it was not conducive.
mm,
The longer I spent in isolation, the darker and darker things got.
mm,
And so it's helpful not to like necessarily force interaction, but like just being around the people who will love on you, being
yeah.
around people where it's not like we have an agenda. It's like I just need to just come lay on the couch and like let's just watch TV. So just finding like that support system.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I went through therapy and I had these expectations for people and how they should show up. And my therapist had asked me, like, well, did you tell them that? And I'm like,
Mm,
no, because they should just know. And that was an eye-opening moment because it's like, I guess they shouldn't just know because they've never been through it. And so one of the things that I find even helping friends navigate is being vocal about what you need. I think people are scared of like saying
mm-hmm.
the wrong thing or doing something that's not helpful. And so they'd rather just do nothing because it's like, I don't want to like set you off. If you're having a good day, I don't want to trigger you, by saying something. But I do believe that if you're struggling or if it's like, I just need a hug or I just need to sit on the phone and cry. Like I just need to get this out. I think we have to do a better job of not expecting people to just know what to do and reaching out to your safe people and saying, "Hey, I'm not okay. Like I'm not okay. I need to get out of the house." And having that support because again, isolation, avoidance, and that's one of the biggest things that I preach to people because they're like, "No, I got to do this." And I'm like, "Please, I beg of you, if you do nothing else, feel every feeling, even if it's
Mm,
up and down, if it's unstable, feel it all because
mm,
I try to suppress the feelings and again, weeks later, I was just hit with a ton of bricks and was crying nonstop. And it's just like I thought I was okay because I kept going through the motions. And it's like as long as I stay busy, like all was well. And then I think you get to a point in your grief cycle where you can't run from it anymore.
mm,
And then when you're forced to be still, it's just like oh my gosh, like not like, and then it's debilitating. So that's why I tell people it's gonna be up and down. I'm not gonna, it's going to be up and down. People ask me, well, like, how long did it take? And I'm like, it's not a linear process. It's not like, okay, grief started this year, by year 5, you're good to go. Like it's ongoing. Like
mm,
it can be 20 years from now, and you still may have your moments, or you still may have a thought or a memory and so I think a lot of people try to rush through the grief process as
yeah,
though there's this final destination. And it's like, unfortunately, there's not. Like
mm-hmm.
there just simply is not. So people are like, well, I gotta get over it. And it's like who said that? Like who
Right.
told you that you had to get over this traumatic loss? Like whoever put the pressure on you to feel that way? And a lot of times it's self-inflicted and just feeling like I should be over it by now. It's been 10 years and it's just like, but why should you? And there's no response. And it's like, exactly. There's no reason that you should be over it. And then even I have been helpful to people who don't say helpful things. And so like oh well, everything happens for a reason. There's a time and a place for things. Like right after something happens, it's not helpful. And so again, I think that's where it comes to that it being a two-way street, people asking, how can I support you? What can I do for you? I think a lot of things that go overlooked, send them a DoorDash card, set up a meal train so they don't have to worry about cooking dinner and things of that nature. Offer to come over and clean. If they have kids, ask if you can, take the kids for a couple hours. Like just that kind of support where it's not necessarily, oh, like what can I say to help you grieve, but it's like, but support me in other ways so that I can, like, I'm not trying to do 1,000 things and take care of everything, but also trying to process this. So I think if people were more forthcoming to say, hey, I don't really know what to do. I've never been in this situation. Like, what can I do to show up for you? And then again, the person on the receiving end to say, maybe it's like, I actually don't know right now, but I can let you know, or this is something that would be helpful, or things of that nature. Or again, just reaching out when they feel themselves like spiraling or getting into a dark place, but just allowing it to be a two-way street where there's not too much expectation on one or the other. I think some people are like, well, if you were drowning, why didn't you reach out? It's like, it's not always that easy.
Mhm.
Not wanting to feel like a burden when people are going through their own things or have their own lives going on. So it has to be like a two-way thing, and it has to be with like your safe people. If you
Yeah.
have people that don't show up for you any other time, strongly suggest those aren't the people that you depend on, because it'll just set you up for disappointment. And then that adds to the grief that you're already dealing with, because it's like, wow, like, okay. The other thing I think was not expecting me out of people.
Mm,
So I would run myself ragged. Even when I knew he was transitioning, I was still showing up for everyone. I was still like, I
mm,
was always the strong friend. And so I was still showing up for people calling me with their life troubles. And I'm still like, oh, how can I help you? Um, and it was just like, I would have expected that, but it was a very false expectation and a very disappointing one, because I expected people to do for me like what I did for them. And I had to come to the realization, everyone is not you. Like, everyone
mm,
doesn't operate the way that you do. And so you can't necessarily fault people for that. You may have to like reprioritize, relationships and friendships. But it was just like, I expected people to do what I do for them. And it was just like, hmm. And I think that was the awakening for me of reprioritization. I cannot keep pouring and pouring and pouring from an empty cup, and no one is pouring back into me. And so that was where I really and I don't even like to say selfish, because it wasn't selfish, but I really got to a point where I'm like, no, it's me first. Like, no, like, you're calling and I'm not just going to be available. I'm not answering. Like, I'm dealing with something right now, so I'm not going to answer. And before, I felt so guilty, and I'm just like, oh, well, what if someone really needs me? But it's like, but you need you, and
mm,
you are literally neglecting yourself to try to show up for other people. And how fair is that? So I think that was like literally the turning point where I'm like, no, boundaries. Like, we're gonna enforce some boundaries, because I can't keep running the way in which I'm running. Like, it's
mm,
not fair to me. But also it just wasn't sustainable. Like, I'm literally running on fumes trying to be there for everyone else. And I'm also trying to navigate losing like a major, major person in my life. So I highly also suggest journaling.
mm,
A lot of times people can't verbalize, or their thoughts don't necessarily like make sense. And it's like, my mind is all over the place. I highly encourage people to journal, like, just through the process of like, maybe one day you go back and you look to see, especially for people who are really hard on themselves, of like, I feel like I'm just not moving on. And it's like, well, go back and read your journal entries from 3 months ago when you were literally crying for 24 hours nonstop and you couldn't
mm,
sleep and you couldn't eat.
mm.
See that how you're thriving right now. Like, just to even track the process. But also it's just holding everything in isn't helpful. And if you don't have that safe person to talk to, then journaling is like your next best thing, where you can literally write it all out, to where it's not just stuck up here. It's like, oh my gosh, I have all of these emotions bottled up inside. But it's like, you have a way to get those out through journaling and expression.
Yeah, no, that's good. Those are phenomenal, phenomenal practical tips. Just because you're walking them through the process and you're giving them spaces to be flexible. You're like, okay, if this doesn't work, you got this. If you can't do this, you got this. I think that's very helpful for everyone listening and watching today. Especially when it comes to those thoughtful gifts. Like you said, it's not linear. It's like I need support and check-ins year by year. And then the important holidays, Father's Day, his birthday, New Year's, Thanksgiving. And I think as a florist, when I do deliveries, we always have the sympathy ones for funerals.
Hmm.
And then you have the ones that you deliver to the house for the people who are long distance, and that's it. And I'm just like, No, it
Yeah.
should be a quarterly thing. Like you should be giving flowers and say, just thinking of you, just praying for you
Hmm.
consistently, because it is a lifelong loss, you know. It doesn't just heal over 1 year or 2 years. So that's, I think that's so important for those who are seeing their friends grieve, and just knowing how to support them better, I think. And then I love how you mentioned the DoorDash card, because that's so real. Because people don't cook, people don't eat. Like you don't
Yes.
have the strength. So that's so awesome. I That's something for me to write down, because that makes a
And I
difference.
think it's something that no one really, you don't think about it because it's like you're more so trying to like, how can I help you with the loss?
Right.
And that's the part that we're focused on. But it's like if you can alleviate other stress,
Yeah.
whether it's grocery delivery or like I said, dinner, to where I'm not trying to think about how am I feeding my kids. I don't even want to get out of bed. Like I don't
Right.
even want to like look at anyone. But it's just something that's super simple. Everyone can stay at home, so it doesn't require anyone to like go out and do anything. But yeah, it's just something super practical where it's just like I don't know what to do. I don't think there's anyone in this world who's going to reject having, dinner taken care of for them. And I love when people set up the meal trains where people can just voluntarily sign up to either bring a meal, or just, send a gift card or what have you. Again, because it's something people don't think, just take some of the load off of me.
Yeah.
And then it lets me have the time to just really sit. And again, I'm not stressed about all of these other things that need to get done. A lot of people, when they're grieving, they just simply don't eat. They may not have an appetite.
Mm.
That's another way of like, if I don't have an appetite, I'm definitely not going to get up and cook. Like, I'm just not. And so sending food is like, okay, even if I just nibble on it, it's something that I have, or I can put it in the fridge for tomorrow, or just something to that effect. So, yeah, for people who are just like, I have no idea, send a DoorDash card. Send a 99 cent thinking of you card with a handwritten note. Drop it off
Mm.
on their porch. I think a
Mm.
lot of times when we're grieving, you feel forgotten. And
Mm.
so to let someone know that you have not forgotten about them, that they still are on your mind, you're still praying for them. It may seem very small and like, oh, what difference is it going to make? But I can assure you, like people who are grieving absolutely love and appreciate feeling seen and feeling like they have not been forgotten and that their burden and their grief has not been forgotten.
Mm, that's beautiful. That's so awesome. And again, so helpful for those people who are watching, just to know how to cope and recover. Not recover, but just cope. I don't think you ever recover, but cope. And then those who are also just listening and trying to be there for the grieving friend. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for coming and for showing up, and just for declaring the beautiful faith of your father that he had. Oh my goodness. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you for
That's,
having me.
yeah, of course. And hopefully we can have you again, because
Absolutely.
yay. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know your journey as well. We will see you guys on the next one. Bye.